Hello and welcome to the SIWI Sofa, where we learn more about the wide array of water-related issues being discussed this week in Stockholm, meeting some of the most interesting participants at this year's World Water Week. My name is Eric Paglia, host of the SIWI Sofa, and in this session we're going to be discussing a new framework being launched by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. It's called Coping with Water Scarcity in Agriculture, a global framework for action in a changing climate. And to learn more about this, we have Mr. Eduardo Mansur, the Director of the Land and Water Division at FAO, and Karen Franken, the FAO Senior Water Resources Officer and Manager of FAO's Water Database Aquastat. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Very nice to have you here this morning. And perhaps we start with some background information, Eduardo. You can tell us about what you think are the most pressing water-related issues in the world right now.
Thank you very much, Eric, for the opportunity of being here this morning. It's great for us to have the chance to talk to the participants of the World Water Week on this new global framework that FAO is launching at COP22 of the Climate Change Convention in Morocco in a couple of months from now. You asked the major pressing issues on water. Maybe I would like to point to two major issues. The issue of water governance is something that is bringing lots of attention, requires lots of attention, because of all the implications around the water management, the management of water resources. When we talk about water governance, we talk about the right policies, the right institutional framework, the financial mechanisms that will make water reach those that need it in the right moment. When we talk about water scarcity, there is a false perception that there is not enough water in the world. That's not the case. Water scarcity is sometimes physical. There is no water in that very moment for that community that is requiring it. But sometimes it's economical. There is no infrastructure to take the water to those who need to consume it. Or sometimes it's institutional, because there is no arrangements made for the water to give for the people to have access to the water resource they need. And yesterday, in one of our debates here in the World Water Week, we discussed about a political water scarcity when there is no political decision, or there are wrong political decisions that lead to water scarcity for certain groups. We have to address these issues with better water governance. So I would point out this is the number one. For the second aspect I would like to raise is related to climate change. We have enough evidence nowadays, Eric, scientific evidence, that climate phenomena, extreme phenomena, are likely to become more frequent and more severe. And that they will impact the water resources, as they will impact lots of other resources. But particularly in our concern in the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, in FAO, is food production and food safety. And as you know, agriculture corresponds to about 70% of the water use, of the water withdrawal in the planet. So the bulk of our freshwater use goes to the agriculture sector, for food production, for other type of biomass production, for fiber, for fodder. So we have to pay attention of this enormous impact that climate change is likely to cause on agriculture because of its impact on availability of water. So I would put these two major topics for discussion as the areas that we have to address: the governance and the climate change impacts.
Karen, what would you say are the most vulnerable regions in the world in terms of water security?
Well, each region has a problem with water issues. I mean, there are spots where there are huge problems, but coming back to water and agriculture, I think one of the most vulnerable areas is sub-Saharan Africa. And there you have issues of economic and scarcity and financial and human lack of capacity, more than the physical water scarcity. As Eduardo says, there are different sorts. So there the issue is the physical, the economic water scarcity and the human water scarcity, you can call it. And you see also that, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, the It's the region where the water resources are the least developed. If you look at agriculture again, globally, for example, 20% of the area that is cultivated has irrigation equipment, so it is irrigated. In Asia, it's, for example, more than half in many regions. When you go to sub-Saharan Africa, while the water resources might be there, it's only about 3% that has an irrigation equipment. So while we know there's a lot of poverty in sub-Saharan Africa, there's also, on the other hand, a lot of potential for improvement linked to water. Install irrigation. If you have irrigation and other inputs also, you can have double or even triple or even more the production than you have at present. So I think that is the reason with the most issues, but also maybe still the most potential for reducing the vulnerability.
And Eduardo, what does FAO bring to the table, and how do you generally work with water security in at-risk areas?
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting question. It's not specifically on the issue of water scarcity, but I will put you generally what FAO brings, and then we can enter into the water scarcity point. Basically, FAO has a mandate as the United Nations agency specialized on food and agriculture to work on three main objectives, and these objectives have been defined by our member countries. The number one is eradicate hunger. So I'm talking about eradication of hunger, not reduction of hunger, because we can eradicate hunger in our lifetime. The second one is the eradication of poverty. That's the main target of the Sustainable Development Goals that have been adopted by the United Nations last year in September. And the third one is the sustainable management of natural resources. These three objectives are linked. Of course, water resource management links mostly on the third one, on sustainable management of natural resource for poverty and for eradication of hunger. So this is I would say we have a mandate to act. The second point that FAO brings to the table is technical capacity. We keep in the FAO a number of experts that have possibility to contribute to the needs of the member countries in terms of technical assistance, being it political, in the sense of developing the right legislation, the right regulations, and comparative analysis with other countries, as well as technical solutions that could be guided through the FAO, and then I come with the third point that FAO works a lot on, partnerships. It's very important that in any approach nowadays, there is no owner of the truth. We have to work in an integrated way, because in a world that communication has gained tremendous technology and space, we have to build up and not duplicate. We have one of the biggest challenges now in terms of what to put on the table is how to put it in a coordinated fashion that you don't start doing things twice or three times, that you optimize the resources that are available, and then it's to target. And then where we target? The member countries. These are the ones that should receive the technical assistance to build local capacity. The work of FAO is to make sure that the countries are independently capable of running their problems and solving their problems on food security, on agriculture production, management of natural resources. Let me point you one more point that I think FAO brings to the table when we talk about a global framework. FAO is an agency that has a global presence. We have our headquarters in Rome, in Italy, but we have a significant presence in the world with regional offices in all the continents, with sub-regional officers distributed in these continents, and then with about 80 country offices. And that means that we have a physical presence that can support the countries where they really need its local basis. So I think this is the set that motivated us to address water scarcity in a global framework.
So given all this experience and institutional capacity that FAO brings to the table, tell us more about this new framework and how it differs from similar initiatives of the past.
As I mentioned in the beginning, one of the major issues that we have addressed now is the issue of climate change and water scarcity. It's likely that climate change phenomena will increase the extreme events, and the likelihood of, for instance, droughts, which are the peak of water scarce situation, but not necessarily drought is water scarcity. One thing is different. A non-water scarce country can have drought. We have this case now happening in southern Europe when there is lack of rain, not necessarily on water scarcity countries. But what motivated us most to engage? You are familiar with the Paris Agreement, the agreement that has been reached last year at the Paris COP, Conference of the Parts of the Climate Agenda. The Paris Agreement requests countries to present their intended nationally determined contributions to climate reduction. And by March this year, 188 countries have submitted their INDCs, their intended nationally determined contribution. And Eric, 103 of them mention water scarcity. So we are not coming up with something we invented, but we are responding to a country demand. They want to have actions directed to mitigation and to adaptation to water scarcity, and agriculture being the bulk of the water use, we have to have a response. So this is the main reason why we are engaging on this. This is are we doing something completely new? No, we are responding to an issue that is growing. Another point that I would like to bring is the relationship with water scarcity and food production. Agriculture sector are the one that suffers most in water scarce conditions, especially in drought conditions, because food is basically a requirement for food production is a basic requirement for water. I mean, water is a base input for food production. So we have to make sure that we have the solutions for addressing food production in water scarce condition. And that not necessarily means putting water in the agriculture field, because sometimes the solution is to have adapted agriculture crops, adapted livestock, developed seeds that are more resistant to water. So it's not necessarily the water. We have to think outside the water box, if you know what I mean, to get solutions for water scarcity. That's why FAO is so motivated to engage in this new platform, in this new framework, as we are calling. The problem is that we cannot do it alone. So we call partners, we call institutions interested to join us, because it requires the inputs of different agencies, sectors, governments, for us to reach a meaningful result, because the issue of climate change has a lot to do with preparedness. If we prepare beforehand, we can mitigate the impacts and adapt to the impacts that are coming. So this is where we are working at now.
So, Karen, Eduardo here has talked about the Paris Agreement and put the idea of water scarcity in the context of the Paris Agreement. Perhaps you can say a few words about the new framework in the context of the other big achievement from last year, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, if you look at, for example, the Millennium Development Goals, which are the ones that preceded the Sustainable Development Goals, there was nothing on water really. Water was a bit here and there included in the different targets. Now, when they formulated the Sustainable Development Goals, they considered that water was so important that there is now a specific goal on water. So to ensure availability of water and sustainable management of water. It's the goal, the SDG 6. And targets in SDG 6, they deal with, for example, drinking water supply and sanitation, water quality, wastewater, ecosystems, water-related ecosystems. But there's also one specific target, target 6.4, which deals with water scarcity and water use efficiency. And this is, for example, very much linked to the global framework also. And I think that monitoring these two targets, water stress and water use efficiency, is very important for the global framework in order to be possible, in order to be able to know what direction to go. On the other hand, the global framework is also very important for the SDGs, so that we monitor and then we can see what can be reached. So the SDGs, they impact on the global framework. The global framework is very closely linked to the Sustainable development goals. And especially for agriculture, it's again the 6.4. It's again because the 6.4 deals with water scarcity, water quantities, and there again agriculture is by far the biggest user. So maybe where most needs to be done linked to water use efficiency also.
And Eduardo, you've been talking about the Paris Agreement, which was achieved at COP21. And now you're using the occasion of COP22 to launch this new framework. It's taking place in Marrakesh in Morocco later this year. Why have you chosen COP22 for this launch? And do you think that water issues have received enough attention so far in international climate negotiations?
Well, thank you. Very interesting questions, both of them. First, let me start from the second. Has water achieved sufficient space in the international negotiations? Unfortunately, no. I think water is a latecomer in the international debate about natural resource management. I would say in the last 20 years, it's getting there, but it's getting there slowly. Water, and when we talk about international negotiation, we're not talking about the water meetings of international water experts. This is perfectly okay. This is the 26th World Water Week, right? This has been happening many years. My point is the political discussion, because water has been understood as that resource that comes here. It's free. And people only pay attention when you open the tap and there is no water. And that's something that has been striking us, because we should have prevented that situation of opening your tap and not having water to reach that degree. And there are ways of doing this. So I think the attention has not been given to the issue of water in the proportion of the problem that it may represent in the future. If you look at the World Risk Analysis of the World Economic Forum edition of 2015, last year, they put water risks as the #1 risk in terms of impacts. Not in terms of likelihood, because likelihood is #8. But come on, #8 out of 10 is pretty high, man, in terms of the risks that it represents of having a significant impact in human life in this planet. So the alert is there now. Then you mentioned, let's go to the second part. Why Marrakesh? Why COP22? The government of Morocco offered us a great opportunity. The government of Morocco made very clear that they want to have this COP in Africa as being the African COP, as being the agriculture crop, as the agriculture is the engine of the socio-economic development of Africa. And they mentioned a lot the natural resource management, because that's the basis of the agriculture production in Africa and everywhere else in the world. So Morocco offers us the opportunity to turn the page of discussing agriculture and natural resource management in the climate dialogue in this COP. This is going to be the COP for agriculture, the COP for natural resource management, towards mitigation, and mainly adaptation to climate change, another latecomer in the climate debate. But agriculture is both a cause of climate change, when, for instance, to produce more food, there is deforestation, and deforestation causes greenhouse gas emissions because of burning and destroying of carbon stocks, the vegetation on Earth, because of burning soil carbon, like the case of peatlands. So it's a cause of climate change, but it's also a casualty. As I mentioned before, agriculture being affected by climate change because of the climate change impacts, like water scarcity, so like drought phenomena. The need to address the issue of agriculture and climate change in a very consistent way. We want to bring this debate to COP22. Why? Because if we manage to make sure that the global framework is launched there in one of those action days, the action days that happen in the COP, and they are part of the Lima Paris Action Agenda, which is a set of events that are not within the decision, the formal decision mechanisms of the convention, but they are linked as support mechanisms. The action agenda reports gradually on their progress and invites not only countries but also institutions, civil society to participate. So the idea of launching the global framework on coping with water scarcity in agriculture at one of the action days is exactly to create a link to the COPs and gradually report in COP23, in COP24, the progress that we have achieved towards coping with water scarcity in agriculture. So it's a good momentum. It's politically important that the government of Morocco is leaving to us the opportunity to bring to the table the discussion of agriculture adaptation. So much so that the government of Morocco themselves are launching an initiative that they call the AAA. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's agriculture adaptation in Africa. So it's a regional initiative that they want to raise with the political will. So it's, I think we are resolving the problem of your first question. Is it sufficiently discussed at political level? Not yet, unfortunately not. We have the opportunity now? Yes, we do.
So this could very well be a watershed when it comes to water in the climate negotiations this year.
Thank you.
Okay. And will this new framework help countries implement some of the commitments they made at the in the Paris Agreement?
Absolutely. The whole point is to respond to the country's NDCs when the intended nationally determined contributions will become let's say, a commitment. And the countries will have to respond, and the union agencies have to back them up to make sure that they achieve this. One important point on the NDCs, and I would like to raise this, is monitoring. Because what you can't measure, you can't manage. At least what you can't compare, you can't manage. So you have to have a baseline. You have to have an information that you will be able to bring to another situation. When you bring situation A that you consider a stressful situation like water scarcity into a situation B, when you consider, for instance, better livelihoods, you will say that you reached a transformational process, a transformational project. So what we intend to do with this framework is to bring transformational projects to the countries to move towards sustainable agriculture. The target sustainable agriculture. The target's not only the water, but to have sustainable food production for all. The challenge we have to make sure that everybody in this planet can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's the whole point that we are doing this initiative for.
Okay, and Karen, perhaps you can talk about data being a very crucial aspect of measuring and monitoring and targets and other things. The data being generated by states is crucial for defining the level of water stress in a country or in a region. In this regard, can you please explain the importance of the FAO water database that you work with called Aquastat?
Well, yeah, it's exactly what Eduardo says. I keep repeating also this quote from what you can't measure, you can't manage. And I think that's a bit forgotten in all the things that we are doing. We tend to talk a lot about governance, and governance, there are legal aspects, policy aspects, financial aspects, etc. But in order to be able to implement or to a good governance, it needs to be based on solid data. And I think data is a challenge nowadays, because on the one hand, people think, okay, data are just there, it's easy, just get them. On the other hand, it's also often said, yeah, but it's so expensive to get data, so can't we better use it? But the issue is also, I mean, the impact of wrong or bad policy because you don't have the data is much more expensive than just getting the data. So it has to be a bit realized like that. One example I can give, for example, is there's a lot talking about the problem of groundwater and groundwater governance. But that groundwater is especially a kind of dangerous issue because surface water you see, but groundwater you don't see. And now there is more and more risk that there is an over-exploitation of groundwater. So people just, it's also done by subsidies on pumps, on electricity. So there are regions, for example, in China or India, where the groundwater level dropped already by 100 meters. And this, of course, is very serious. On the one hand, you need more and more expensive equipment to get the water from deeper and deeper. On the other hand, when you constantly overexploit the source, that means you withdraw more than what it is recharged by the hydrological system, then it becomes almost irreversible. And so again, and this is the problem. It's a huge challenge, and it's also a huge challenge for a program like Aquastat, who really tries to deal with the issue of water resources, of water uses, agriculture, water management. And the issue is really that in many countries, and I'm not talking only about the poor countries, but even about European countries, that the data is a big challenge, data on water. So I think that's a big issue. We hope now that with the Sustainable Development Goals, that's why I'm quite happy with them, even though I think there are so many targets, so many goals, that it will be another challenge, the amplitude, the quantity. But I hope that then it becomes realized that in order to know whether you reach your goal or your target, you need to monitor. And what means monitoring? Monitoring doesn't mean to talk about policies. Monitoring means data, so that you can see the trend, what is happening, where we are going. Are we going better? Are we going worse? Do we have to take measures? So for me, one of the biggest challenges is not just talking, but it's getting the data.
Okay, just one final question. Eduardo, what kind of partners are you looking to get involved with this new FAO framework?
Before we go there, let me just pick on from what something that Karen mentioned, the importance of data. We launched here yesterday at the World Water Week a new book from FAO that's related to water accounting and auditing. It's a source book, and it's available at the UN Water stand for those who are interested. It will provide elements for analyzing data sources and water auditing. And I would recommend all the participants to pass by and get a copy. Also, you can get the QR code where you can download it, because the book is also available, of course, through the internet. Coming to your question related to the partners we are looking for. The whole point here is to think global, but act locally. Why? Because the changes have to be made on the ground. When we talk about transformational projects, it's not organized in a workshop or a congress or a global event. Is organizing a project that will bring people to improve livelihoods at local people, in our case, those who produce agricultural products, being it food, being it fiber, being it livestock, elements that are used as raw material for the industry that's based on agriculture. So we need to think global. So we need to have partner institutions. We are looking at institutional partners that could bring the global solutions, the global thinking, the global analysis, and the experiences for us to analyze together and avoid duplication and rationalize resource. And then we need to have governments and local institutions that will put this into action. Remember that the title of the initiative is a global framework for action. It's not a talk shop. We have basically identified two major areas where we want to attract partners. One we will call the knowledge group. The knowledge group is the group that retain the knowledge generation, the innovation, the research institutions, the academic institutions. FAO is not a research institution, but it's a good interface between science, policy, and practice. Because of our membership, we can deliver the results of science, the results of research to the users through the channel of our member countries. So this is our role, and we want this to play through the knowledge mechanism. For projects to happen, we need investment. We need financial mechanisms and resources to implement. So the second largest group of partners we are looking at this initiative is what we call the investment group. We have to identify within the donor community, the resource mobilization community, but also from the private sector, those that would be willing to engage in solutions at the local level. It's not that the global framework will become a fund. No, it will be a catalyzer for actions on the ground. And then the funds channeled through the country that will receive the benefit. So basically, we are looking at global partners that are willing to help us act locally. And all institutions are welcome.
Okay, Eduardo Mansur and Karen Franken from the FAO. Thanks very much for joining us here on the SIWI SOFA, and best of luck with the launch of the new framework in Marrakesh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to the SIWI SOFA. Stay tuned for more episodes throughout the World Water Week.